morning and welcome back to Sherburne Public Library's Book Talk. This week we are celebrating women directors. So we've got several directors to talk about and several movies to talk about. So we will start with Michael.
Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. So I'm going to start out by talking about Penny Marshall. Penny Marshall is basically known as the first woman director to score 1 million plus in box office receipts with, I believe, a league of their own. And I'm going to talk a little bit about her. First, she comes from a background from filmmaking. One of her comments that she talked about was she wasn't a cinematographer, but she knew how to talk to people. And she came from a background of people. Her father worked, he made industrial films. Of course, her brother, Gary Marshall, was a big director himself, TV and movies. Her sister was also a producer and casting director. So they were really in the film industry. One of the things I found out that's sort of neat is that her dad's name, Tony Marshall, actually it was originally Masorelli, and they changed it, of course, but I thought that was interesting. Her brother describes her, well, actually, her name was Carol Penny Marshall, and they had named her after Carol Lombard, who was a screwball comedian. But she dropped the Carol and just stuck with Penny. Her brother, Gary, also said she was born with a ham bone or funny bone and knew how to use it. So she really knew how to use directing wise and all that stuff. So her movies, the first big one was Big, starring Tom Hanks in 1988. And this, some people say, sort of turned his career around. He had made a bunch of movies that were and this was his first big popular movie, was Big, where it starts out as a little kid who's at a carnival, and he meets, or he encounters one of those tell your fortune and grant your wish machines. And so he makes a wish, and of course he gets it. He wants to be big. And so it goes through the life of this 12-year-old who's in a 30 or 25, 30-year-old body, and all that he encounters. And Tom Hanks does a wonderful job in that. Then in 1990, he did Awakening. Penny directed Awakenings. Again, another great movie, Robert De Niro and Robin Williams. And it's a serious movie. But it's about a hospital, a psych hospital outside of New York City, where people are basically catatonic. They get up and move around, but they don't really say or do much. They just sort of stare into space. And Robin Williams plays the doctor who comes up with a medicine that helps bring them out of the catatonic state. And Robert De Niro is one of the patients. Unfortunately, the medicine doesn't last long. And so it's sort of a sad, bittersweet ending. It's on the, I always say, Flowers for Algernon sort of type story, but a great movie. It was nominated for Best Picture, which I would attribute to being, Penny Marshall being involved. Also, Robert De Niro was nominated as Best Actor. Again, she's very good at working with people. Next was the one that I believe grossed the 100+ million, is A League of Their Own in 1992. And in it, she had Rosie O'Donnell, Madonna, which was a big thing, and then Gina Davis, and several other women I should be able to name, but can't pull up. And of course, Tom Hanks. And the most famous line that most people can quote from that movie is, "There's no crying in baseball." I know Hanks had said when Penny passed away in 2018, he said they shared a lot of laughs, and he brought out the best, or she brought out the best in him. So that's really cool. And the movie that I'm really going to talk about is that I originally thought was The Preacher's Wife. And this is usually like when they list Penny Marshall's films, this is usually 4 or 5. This is my favorite film, my favorite Christmas movie, the one that I watch every year. And I know it's Easter, not Christmas, but this is the one that made me want to talk about Penny Marshall. Again, Denzel Washington, Whitney Houston, okay? And basically, I tried to think it's totally black cast. I don't believe if there are any there are white people in the movie because they're, but there is I don't believe there are any people with major lines per se in this particular version. But it's a wonderful movie. It's based on The Bishop's Wife, which is another great movie. This, of course, they got to add Whitney Houston singing a bunch of great songs, and not just her, but a lot of the gospel music. Denzel Washington, you gotta love Denzel, and I can't remember his name, but he does a great job too. And then there are the 2 little boys, which just make it sweet and adorable. Their children, or one of them is their children, and one of them is his best friend. And actually, that's how the story starts. Is the little boy says a prayer to God because his best friend is being sent to a foster home because his grandmother can't take care of him anymore. So he takes to help. He says a prayer to help us out and to help out his dad as well. So Denzel comes down as the angel to help save their family, basically, and of course it has a happy ending. It's a great movie. It's a great feel-good movie, and it's wonderful. I enjoy it every Christmas. Real quick, I was going to read a couple more things people said about her passing away. I like this one from Josh Gad. At a time when men dominated, Penny Marshall broke barriers as a director, giving us hit after hit. A League of Their Own, Awakenings, and Big aren't simply great movies, they're classics. Made by a director who was simultaneously setting up shots while breaking down walls, which I think says a lot about her. And then another lady said, Penny Marshall was one of the most important trailblazers. Her comic talents brought success and fame, but she truly broke the mold with her directing Big, Awakenings, A League of Their Own, becoming the first woman to direct a movie that grossed 100+ mil. So those are just really nice things. And one of the things she said was I think I said this before, but she didn't know how to be a cinematographer, and she knew that. She let the cinematographer do her job. She knew how to talk to people and how to, get to bring the best out of them. So that's my take on Penny Marshall, and I suggest all these movies if you haven't seen them: Big, Awakenings, A League of Their Own, and of course at Christmas time, check out The Preacher's Wife.
Yeah, she was excellent. I'll date myself, but I remember her from Laverne and Shirley first as an actress. They were just hilarious in that show, and she definitely does have that comic timing and understands comedy. So it makes total sense that her working with Tom Hanks was a big success, because obviously he has a good sense of comic timing and how comedy works. So that's great. Yeah. So obviously she was, groundbreaking, and will, kind of blazed a trail for a lot of other women that we will talk about. Which leads me into I'm going to talk about 2 directors. First one is Catherine Bigelow. Catherine Bigelow is, she's the only woman at this point to win the Oscar for Best Director. She won in 2008 for The Hurt Locker, which starred Jeremy Renner. Yeah, can I say his name? Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie. It was an excellent movie. It was set in Baghdad in, I don't know, the early 2000s. And it was during the Iraq War. I'll read you just a little thing. A sergeant recently assigned to an Army bomb squad is put at odds with his squad mates due to his maverick way of handling his work. So basically, they are the ones. Jeremy Renner is the person who goes out and decommissions bombs that are laid out. They're usually hidden under the ground, or they're hidden in a piece of garbage, or they'll find one, and then he'll go in with this huge, looks like a big space suit, but even bigger, to help protect him in case the bomb goes off, and he delicately disarms the bombs. So honestly, I think you have to be crazy to do a job like that. And he was a little, he was a maverick, as they said. He was very, he did things his own way, and he didn't necessarily tell everybody else what he was doing, which was a little dangerous with his guys. But it was a good show, a good movie, and it really got into the why he was the way he was. And it's a great movie. It's very tense and very emotional in some of them. There's some really emotional scenes in it. So I highly recommend that one. That is in the 4-county system. The other one that she got a lot of notice for was Zero Dark 30, which was another war movie in 2012. And that was the what do you call it? Let's see, it's a chronicle of the decade-long hunt for Al-Qaeda terrorist Osama bin Laden. So this is the story of the SEAL team and how they got there, but it really deals with Jessica Chastain's character, who is part of the people in the office who are making things happen and figuring out where is Osama bin Laden. And she's I think CIA, I think that's who it is. She's going through all the evidence and pictures, and interviews people, and they're sometimes they're using some terrorist type tactics to get people to confess things and tell us where this guy is. So it's sometimes it's hard to watch. It's really tough. It's a really tough movie, which I think is really interesting that Catherine Bigelow is known for these two movies. They're both military war movies. But she does it in a really, it's a very honest way. You feel like you're really there, like this really is what it was. And so in that case, of course, there's some horrifying moments in it, but there's also some really good moments in it. And of course, in the end, as we all know, they did get Osama bin Laden, and the team that went in was, expert at what they did, and they got him. So it's a just really interesting, really good take on that scene of that sequence of events. They won one Oscar for Zero Dark 30. That was for sound editing, but they were nominated for Best Picture. Jessica Chastain was nominated as Best Actress, writing, original screenplay, and film editing. So they were nominated for a lot of things. It's interesting, she had the same writer, original screenplay, Mark Bowl, won for Hurt Locker and he was nominated for Zero Dark 30. So he did screenplay for both of those. I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, so she kind of holds that title until the next woman, comes in and finally wins the Oscar again for Best Director. She's holding it for us. So I thought that was pretty cool. The other director I wanted to talk about was Sophia Coppola. You might recognize her name as being the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola, who is best known probably for the Godfather series. He's the director of those. She directed in 2003, she directed a movie called Lost in Translation, which got a lot of buzz. She was the writer and the director on it. And she also, writing, directing. Oh, and she produced it also. And she got an Oscar for the writing piece of it. They were also nominated for Best Picture. Bill Murray was nominated as an actor. She was nominated as director. She was the first woman nominated for writing, directing, and producing in the same year. So that was a step for her. If you don't know Lost in Translation, it's a quiet movie. It's one of those where my husband would say nothing really happens. And it's the tagline is, a faded movie star and a neglected young woman form an unlikely bond after crossing paths in Tokyo. So the whole movie takes place in Tokyo. She's there. Scarlett Johansson is there as the wife of a photographer who is, he's working there, and she doesn't really have anything to do. She's just graduated college, but she has one of those degrees like, philosophy or something, where she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life, and she can't really find her way. And so she's kind of lost, and she's left on her own a lot there, and she's in a hotel. And Bill Murray is there. He's this old fading actor who is there to shoot some advertisements for some whiskey or something. And they happen to meet up for some reason. I think they're in the bar or in the restaurant or something in the hotel at some point. And they just start talking, and they just seem to hit it off in a, not in a sexual way, but just in a, like, they both need something. They both need, I think, just human contact and talking, and someone to, be there as their friend. And so it's a quiet, like I said, it's a quiet movie. Nothing really happens. It's just them talking and going places. And then there's the dynamics between her and her husband. And then he also has a wife who is back in the States with their kids. And, I think he kind of is going through a midlife crisis. But it's a very interesting movie. For me, it's one of those movies that I just have to keep watching. I get more out of it every time I watch it, because it's a real good study in humans. So I recommend that one. I love that movie. The other movie that Sophia Coppola directed recently in 2020 was a movie called On the Rocks. And again, this one stars Bill Murray, which is kind of interesting. She must have an affinity working with him. But it really stars Rashida Jones and Marlon Wayans, but Bill Murray is in the supporting role of her dad in this movie. So I'll read you the tagline on that one, just so you could get the idea. A young mother reconnects with her larger-than-life Playboy father on an adventure through New York. So what that really means is that Rashida Jones is married to Marlon Wayans, and she thinks he might be having an affair, but she can't really tell. He's got a new job, and he's working a lot of long hours, and his coworker is this beautiful woman, and things, happen that make her believe that he's maybe having an affair. And she tells that to her father, and her father, he's, like it says, he's a playboy. He left her mother many years ago, was cheating on her, so he does all this investigation into whether her husband's having an affair or not. And it's kind of funny, but it's also very serious. And, so she, in the end, believes that he's having an affair. And then, I don't know if I want to tell you the whole story, but you should watch it. So it's really good. And Bill Murray is funny, but he's also kind of serious. He just like in Lost in Translation, he has some funny moments, but he also has some very serious, moments where he really, shows us that he is an actor. He's not just the guy you've seen way back in the 80s and Stripes and Caddyshack and all of that, where he was just hilarious. Speaking of comic timing and knowing how to do comedy. But anyway, so I would recommend that one too. So all of the movies that I talked about, Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, Lost in Translation, those three are in the 4-county library system. You can get them, just, we'll have to get them brought to our library. The other one, On the Rocks, is still, nobody has that, but it is on Apple TV. So if anybody has that, you can watch it there. But it was a very entertaining movie. Bill Murray was nominated for a Golden Globe in that, and his performance in supporting role. So, so those are my two women, which I think are, again, building blocks for the women that are directing today. Well, some of these are still directing today, but, they're blazing the path, building the path for other up and coming women, which I think we will be talking about next. So Megan, I think I'm going to let you go next.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about Marielle Heller. She's a writer, actress, and director. Her first movie that she directed, she actually wrote it too, is The Diary of a Teenage Girl, which is based on a graphic novel of the same name by Phoebe Gloeckner. It's more of an indie movie, I would say. She also directed, which I know a lot of people have seen this, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks playing Mr. Rogers, which was awesome. Not at all what I was expecting, but awesome. But she's also in she as an actress, she's in The Queen's Gambit. She's Beth's adoptive mom. So so that's who that is. She kind of has been doing everything, and she's only 41, which is amazing. So the one I wanted to talk about that I feel like is the one that is least known of her movies is called Can You Ever Forgive Me? This is from 2018. And if you've ever wondered about Melissa McCarthy playing in a dramatic role, this would be your chance because she's actually really good. She was nominated for an Oscar in this. And it's based on the memoir by Lee Israel. Lee was a magazine writer and book author. She mostly focused on celebrity biographies and stories. She was relatively successful for, I think, decades. And then she ended up writing a biography on Estee Lauder that was widely panned. Basically, what happened was Estee Lauder didn't want her to write a biography, and Estee Lauder said, I'm going to come out with an autobiography. So Lee was kind of rushed in getting her book out, and it didn't go over well. So she ended up kind of falling on hard times. She was an alcoholic, and she couldn't get anyone to hire her after that. So she sort of started to sell her possessions and trying to find other work. And while she was selling things, remember, this is a true story. I didn't know anything about this. I was like floored. While she was selling some of her things, she decided to sell a letter that she'd received years ago from Katharine Hepburn. She sold it to a used bookstore owner. And she realized that she could make some money selling letters and things written by celebrities, but she didn't have any more. So she decided to start forging them. So basically, she started writing these letters. She went to libraries and did a lot of research. And so she was including really specific details, so people thought they were real letters. And she's selling them to all these dealers and making money on it. And at one point, she ended up starting to steal from libraries and archives actual letters and then replacing them with forgeries she had done so she could sell them. She ended up reconnecting with an old friend of hers named Jack, who is played by, let me get his name right, Richard E. Grant, who was also nominated for an Oscar for this film. So he was an ex-con, and he sort of starts helping her with this business. And she's writing these letters, and people are just believing them and buying them and giving her money for them. She's including all these really important facts, so people are like, this has got to be real. And she actually fooled a lot of people. And then she eventually sort of gets caught because she wrote a letter that was supposed to be written by Noel Coward discussing his sexuality, and all these people that knew him were like, no, he would never have done this. So then they started to become suspicious, and they were like, what's going on here? So I don't want to give away what happened, but I didn't know anything about this story. And basically she ended up, I think in like 2008, writing an autobiography, like a memoir called Can You Ever Forgive Me? And which a lot of people were like, I'm not buying that because I don't want to give her money for what she did. But it was actually kind of popular. And so it ended up detailing her life as a forger. And it's just a really interesting story that I don't even know. I don't even know how to describe anything that it's like. It's just really interesting. Melissa McCarthy is really good in this. And it is a dramatic role for her. And I feel like it's, the first time we've seen that. and you won't even recognize her. She looks so different, but I really recommend this one. I don't think a lot of people have seen it or heard of it compared to Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. A lot of people have at this point, but yeah, really recommend this one. It's really interesting.
I think I remember that story. After you started talking about it, I remember that when that movie came out, and it was kind of groundbreaking for Melissa because like you said, nobody thinks she can do anything other than comedy. But and I remember that story too, and thinking, what a freaky thing. Oh my gosh. The fact that she got away with it for so long is kind of amazing. Wow. That's very cool. And so she's the same one who played the foster mother in Queen's
Yeah,
Gambit.
I think her name's Alma. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Yes.
remember, but I love that character. So that's
Yeah.
Awesome job.
Yeah, that's such a good movie. Another series, I should say. Anyway, well, great. Oh my gosh, we have so many good female directors. This is great. So Marie, I think you're going to give us our last one here.
Well, I mean, since you did two, I feel like I have to. So I'm going to do two because I was between a couple. And I just randomly decided today that I was going to do one, but now I'm going to do both because you did two. So I might as well.
It's fine. You might as well. That's kind of what I did too, because I was like, I can't decide, and they're both really important. Mm-hmm. So I just decided. So go for it. Good.
So I'm going to start with the shorter, the person with the shorter story, who is Autumn de Wilde. She recently directed the new version of Emma by Jane Austen that came out this past year. Amazing movie. The cinematography is scrumptious. It reminds me of Wes Anderson-esque type of movie style and stuff like that. Like when I first saw it, it really reminded me of the Grand Budapest Hotel, like the way that it's filmed and all of that sort of thing. And even Fantastic Mr. Fox, like the colors and the style of it, and just there's no really moving cameras. It's all one static shot, which I love that sort of thing. I love those kind of movies that like just have a static shot of somebody who is like, for example, like far away and then walks in instead of the camera zooming in on them. It's the actor who like works for the camera. I love that sort of thing. And that's very much how this movie is structured. And I think a big part of that is because of Autumn de Wilde's background. This was actually her directorial debut, Emma. She was a photographer for years before she was ever a director for anything. She was a photographer for musical bands mostly. She did album work for the Decemberists. She did album work for Elliott Smith, the Watson Twins, White Stripes, Fiona Apple, like all of these like folk rock type bands and stuff like that. Which the other thing is this movie has a lot of that sort of music in it as well. So you can very much tell Autumn de Wilde's aesthetic and type of like what she likes, and which is really cool to me because a lot of the time all of the directing and the screenwriting and the music is so split. But I was reading an interview of Autumn de Wilde where she was talking about how everything was done together. Like everything was like, everybody basically had a say in everything because she wanted to make sure that it was everybody's vision of this new reimagining of an old story, right? The other thing that's really cool about this movie is it's a lot of up and comers that were like her, first of all, her directorial debut. But Anya Taylor-Joy, you were just talking about The Queen's Gambit, plays Emma. Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays in The Queen's Gambit, I just watched this too. I just watched The Queen's Gambit. I can't remember her name. Beth. She's the main chess player. Beth, right. So Anya Taylor-Joy was in this first, and then like she's gotten a lot of traction. I think she was introduced to Autumn de Wilde when Autumn de Wilde was doing photography for Hozier, one of his music videos. Dinner and Diatribes, because she was in that. She was like in the music video with Hosier for that. And that was the first time I had ever heard of Anya Taylor-Joy. So they were like introduced to each other. And so she was, when Autumn de Wilde got the like call for this movie, she was like, we have to get Anya Taylor-Joy. We have to. And she's so good in it. There's this version of Emma has quickly become one of my new favorites, even though I'm very partial to the 2009 version. That's a miniseries that BBC did with Johnny Lee Miller. He played Sherlock in the Sherlock Watson and Holmes and Watson. It was a newer series that he was in. But what I also love about this is another Johnny is in this. Oh, rats. He's one of my new favorite bands because of this movie. He did a song that's at the end, at the beginning of the credits, called Queen Bee, and it's so cute. And it's such a nice little wrap up. And it's like, he's a folk singer. He's so good. Johnny Flynn. Johnny Flynn is his name. And he plays Mr. Knightley, and he is not really an actor. He is a singer mostly. He hasn't done a lot of movies. He hasn't done a lot of acting, but his music is absolutely wonderful. He's been a musician since like 2008. And it was just really, really good. And I love the reimagining of it in this sort of very feminist light, because Emma is already a feminist story to begin with. But like the way that Autumn de Wilde did it, like there was even a nod to The Handmaid's Tale in it, which I loved. Because there's this boarding school of girls, and when they walk around, they're all wearing red capes. So there's a nod to The Handmaid's Tale in it. And there are just so many fun little reimaginings of the story, and it really just gave it, for like, I think for newer audiences, a refresh of the story, because the miniseries by BBC was a little long. Also, the one with Gwyneth Paltrow doesn't follow the book at all. But yeah, so that's Autumn de Wilde, her directorial debut with Emma, and I have a feeling that she's probably going to keep doing more and more, since her style is so like kind of what's trending right now with it, like with respect to movies and stuff like that. So the second director I'm going to talk about was this close actually to unseating Catherine Bigelow of her title of the only female director to win an Oscar for Best Director. And that is Greta Gerweg. Greta Gerweg, one of my favorite directors, I think, and it's partially because of the movies that she has taken on, but she is a actress, writer, director, screenwriter, producer, all of these amazing things. And she is only 37 years old. And she has been active in acting and all of that stuff since 2006. And then she started focusing directorially in 2017 with her movie that she directed that year, Ladybird, which is an amazing, amazing movie. And no, it doesn't have to do with Lady Bird Johnson. That gets people caught up all the time. It has nothing to do with her. It's actually about a young girl who is going to a Catholic school, and she's trying to figure out her way through life. And she and her mom have a lot of tensions, and like the girl is trying to figure out her sexuality, and she's, in this just repressed state of being because of how she has grown up. And she rebels against all of that, and she dyes her hair pink, and like there's this whole thing, and it's so good. And the way that again, I'm a big cinematography person, and the cinematography of Greta Gerwig's movies are absolutely amazing. And Lady Bird is the movie that Greta Gerwig was nominated for Best Director for at the Oscars. It also won a bunch of Golden Globes. It stars Saoirse Ronan, and you were talking about how some directors just have affinities for certain actors that they work with over and over, like Sophia Coppola and Bill Murray, and actually Wes Anderson and Bill Murray are like this too. But almost every movie that Greta Gerwig has directed has had Saoirse Ronan in it. The first one being Ladybird, and the second one being Little Women, the new version of it. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about Little Women again because I can't. It's my whole life. My whole life is Little Women. So Little Women was a movie that came out this like past year. And this is, of course, you know, a new retelling of Little Women. There's been so many, but this one is so unique in so many ways. First of all, it has an amazing cast. Saoirse Ronan is Jo, which I absolutely adore because I love Saoirse Ronan. I've seen her in so many different things. I loved her since she was in The Host, like way back in 2013. And she was so good in Ammonite, which is a historical lesbian movie that's amazing. She was in that with Kate Winslet. But Saoirse Ronan is in this movie. Emma Watson is in this movie. Laura Dern is in this movie, and Meryl Streep is in this movie. Meryl Streep plays Aunt March. It's so good. And it's just the cast is just absolutely amazing. And it's very, like I said, it's very unique the way that this story is told, because it's sort of not backwards per se, but the storyline of it, she weaves it together so well, where some of the ways that the story is told is like just chronological. It goes this, and this. But what she does is something interesting where she starts in the middle, basically, kind of how the musical is. You start in the middle with Jo, like being off in New York City, and then you come back around, and then, you know, you tell the story until you get to that point, and then you keep going. But the other thing that's really interesting that Greta Gerwig includes in this that is not as, like, Jo is a writer. We all know this. But Greta Gerwig takes us through her actual writing process. Like, there are so many scenes of Jo just sitting and writing and like having her book published, and that whole scene of like the book binding, and it was just absolutely beautiful. It was so good. And that's one of those things that Greta Gerwig is really known for, I think, is the little details that she just sprinkles throughout her movies that just make it that much more realistic and amazing and just intriguing. So I really enjoy Greta Gerwig, and I love this adaptation of Little Women. I know there are some people who are like, well, you know, it doesn't, you know, it's not as good as the original with Winona Ryder. It's not as good as this, that, or the other thing. But I disagree, actually, because I love the way it's told. The costume design is beautiful. The cinematography is beautiful. The reimagining of it also in a more feminist way as well, like with Emma. This was very much that way, where it way more focused in on that aspect, as opposed to like the 90s version with Winona Ryder. I very obviously gravitate towards historical fiction and those sort of directors who take a story that is like that and reimagine it and tell it in a more equitable, diverse way. So that's what Greta Gerwig does, and that's what Autumn Wild does, which I really was here for. So I love both of those movies, and I would recommend them to everybody. And we have both of them at the library.
Yay.
So.
No, that's true. I enjoyed the Little Women remake too, even though I do love the Winona Ryder one. But this one I like you said, I like the way they, not backwards, but the way they went back and forth in time to bring it all to the story. That was a really interesting way of doing it, I thought, and I love that. And it was definitely a more feminist view of it, which was a good thing, because I think it brings it to women of, you know, your age and younger who are, you know, living in a different world, and it helps them understand it better, gives them a better appreciation for it, because it could be looked at as like, oh, just these little women who are just trying to get married, you know, which is the surface of what it is.
Well, and that is the surface of what it is. And that was how that story was told for a long time. Right. I mean, not necessarily about Jo, because Jo has always been the, you know, I always think of Jo as the OG icon for feminism in that way. But at least for me, she's my OG. But it's very intentional in it, whereas it's not just following the way that like Louisa May Alcott wrote it, which she did write it with a feminist lens. And that's something that people don't always acknowledge and think about as deeply, because you're getting 4 different stories of 4 different ways of women living their lives. Like right. You have, of course, Meg, the oldest, who lives her life the way that most women at that time would have. She got married, she had kids, she was a housewife, she was doing all that stuff. But then you've got Jo, who goes to work and she writes and she wants to live her life differently, and she wants to be free and independent. And then we have Beth, who is just really trying to get by. She loves music. She wants to, she never thinks she's going to get married. She doesn't really think about the future. She's just thinking about the here and now and spending her life that way. And then, of course, we have Amy, who goes off and travels and has a really good story of that. And she becomes very independent in her own right. And a lot of people don't really acknowledge that when you think of Amy March in Little Women. But that is something that Greta Gerwig did so well in Little Women, is specifically with Amy's story of telling it sort of in a different way, where she's not just a spoiled kid throughout the whole thing. And then she ends up marrying Laurie and all of that sort of thing. It's very much that scene of Florence Pugh, who plays Amy, and Timothy Chalamet. That was the one casting choice that I did not agree with. Don't like him. But with her and him, and she's, painting, and she's talking about, she just wants to be independent. She just wants to be an artist. She just wants to do all of this stuff, and how he's sort of getting in her way by the way he's acting. And that's the other thing. I love that Greta Gerwig acknowledges that Laurie is not infallible, that Laurie is kind of crappy sometimes, because he really is. And there are a lot of people who don't acknowledge that.
But it's true. And I think even Jo was always perceived as just, she was, this is not the right word, but she was just weird because she didn't want to do what other women of that time period did.
Yeah.
Why didn't she want to get married and just have kids like Meg? Yeah, it's all interesting. But I think like I said, it's a really good new take on it to bring it into the present time for people to relate to, because otherwise it's hard to relate to those women. So, well, this is great. Wow, this is like, there's so much women power here. I just feel so good about it. So yeah, it's a celebration of women directors. There's a lot of them out there, and still, and we will. Someone will beat Catherine Bigelow's win. Someone else will win too, and pretty soon it will become not as big of a deal that, if a woman wins, it'll be great, but it won't be as big of a achievement in the sense that it's never been done before, kind of thing. So, like we said, most of these movies are in the 4-county library system. So please come in and check it out. Michael, did you have something?
Who was the lady director for Wonder Woman? Because that's the one person we didn't talk about.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, she's so cool too. She refused to let them costume the Amazons the way they did in the Justice League movie, because she was like, that's dumb. They would never wear armor like that. Oh, she's so cool.
Because she would be, to me, she's the next lady who would beat the big box office numbers.
Right.
Patty Jenkins.
Patty Jenkins, thank you.
Thanks. I was just trying to look it up.
I just needed to shout out for Wonder Woman.
Well,
no,
yeah,
that's so valid, because Gal Gadot deserves that shout out too. And her and Patty Jenkins are going to be working on a new telling of Cleopatra's life, which is really cool. Gal Gadot is going to be Cleopatra, and there were people who were like up in arms about that, because she's not Egyptian, which is, first of all, neither was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was Macedonian, and so is Gal Gadot. Like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, no, that you're right, Mike.
I digress.
She should have been talked about here too. In fact, I remember when I was looking for who am I going to pick out, she was one of them I thought of. So yeah, yay Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot. I love her. Okay, so I think that'll do it for this week. Next week, we're skipping a week. It's Easter weekend, and so we won't be recording a book talk. The following week will be into April, which is Poetry Month. So we will be, I believe, talking about some poets and some poetry. So I hope you have a great week, and come see us at the library. Thanks for listening. Bye.